Welcome to Later in Life, the podcast about reinvention, rediscovery, and the courage to begin again. I'm Bob Bullen. My guest today is someone I've known for nearly 2 decades, Greg Fine. Greg first entered my life when he moved to Chicago and sublet the apartment that my husband and I were leaving, and we became fast friends. And it didn't take long to realize that Greg was the kind of person who never sat still. Anyone who meets Greg quickly realizes a couple of things. He's a natural leader, and he's one of the most extroverted people you'll ever encounter. He's positive, curious about people, and always looking towards what's next. He's also a fascinating combination of being a deeply authentic human and an unapologetic business nerd. He's an entrepreneur, folks. In all my years in corporate America, Greg is the only person I've ever heard use the word synergy without making me absolutely roll my eyes, because the way he describes it in relationship to his life really makes a lot of sense. What I didn't fully appreciate until this conversation was how much of Greg's life had been shaped by the belief that he needed to be the best version of himself at all times, the capable one, the successful one, the dependable one, the person others could count on. As a gay man growing up in a world that didn't always make space for him, Greg internalized a lesson that many LGBTQ+ and other marginalized people often recognize. If you're going to be different, you'd better be exceptional. During our conversation, Greg references this book, The Best Little Boy in the World. It's a landmark memoir about growing up gay and trying to overcome differences through achievement and excellence. It's a theme that resonates deeply with his own story. For much of his life, Greg measured himself against expectations, both real and imagined, and worked tirelessly to meet them. But life has a way of interrupting even the strongest momentum. A major personal crisis forced Greg to stop, reassess, and rebuild, and we talk about that. And what emerged wasn't simply a recovery. It was a reevaluation of what success meant. Rather than continuing to live according to who he thought others expected him to be, Greg began building a life that reflected what he actually wanted. Today, he works remotely while traveling the world, guest lectures, coaches executives, and continues doing what he's always done best, connecting with people wherever he goes. The difference is that now those choices are driven less by obligation and more by intention. Because Greg is usually somewhere on a safari exploring a new city or settling into some villa halfway around the world, we don't get many chances to catch up. So this conversation became an excuse to reconnect, reflect, and explore what happens when someone who has spent a lifetime performing excellence decides to define success on their own terms. Now, before we begin, a few content notes. This episode includes discussions of depression, major depressive disorder, and suicidal ideation. If those topics are difficult for you, please take care while listening. Now here's my conversation with Greg Fine.
Oh, the new tricks. We still got a few hits. Never the wrong time to step to the starting line. Sometimes it's later in life.
Well, Greg, welcome to Later in Life. I know you very well, but for the people listening, tell us who you are.
I'm a gay kid from Montana. I grew up in Missoula, Montana, in Missoula, which is the home of the University of Montana. Very, very middle-class kid. I would say in many ways, we had a very similar upbringing, families that were known and good and our parents loved us and we both turned out to be gay. I hope I didn't break the do they know you're gay? And so I always say I grew up this upper middle class kid in Montana who always had kind of a wanderlust. And when I was in kindergarten, I have a picture of me in kindergarten. I think you've seen it, Bob, and it's me holding a guinea pig. And we're talking early 1970s here, and I'm wearing a turtleneck and a sport coat to kindergarten. I mean, I was rocking the 1970s executive look.
I think I have seen this. Was the sport coat was it plaid?
Oh, of course it's 1975.
Yeah.
Of course it's plaid, and
yeah.
I think I've always sort of had that persona of being a leader. At one point when I became a CEO for the first time, I had people reach out from my youth and say, Greg, you were the CEO of the playground. You have always been sort of the CEO of the convener. And I'm like, oh, bossy. And they go, yeah, but it's different than that. When I was in 5th grade, I decided that I thought all the parents of my friends should know each other. So my birthday party when I was in the fifth grade were all the parents and my friends as a fifth grader, right? So my whole life I've always been a connector. I was always called the mayor of my town. When I was a little kid, I would have I would know all the little old ladies and I would go have tea with them. I literally would have my tea circuit in the neighborhood.
I love that. I can totally picture that.
Yeah, right. I mean, this, then they probably didn't know I was, gay, or they were just, oh, look at this special kid. And so, who am I? I've always just been this kid that's on a journey. I'm adopted. I found out I was adopted when I was in second grade. My mom sat me down and said, Greg, there's something I need to tell you. And I said, okay. And she said, you're adopted. There's no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. And I went, wait a minute, there's no Easter Bunny? And
Santa Claus you figured out, but Easter Bunny you hadn't at that point.
And so I think, if you were to look at my story or my journey in life, there's been a lot of times and a lot of things in my life where there were moments where it could have gone positive or negative. I've dealt with my entire life. I have dealt with a degree of depression my whole life. And luckily it got identified when I was quite young, in elementary school, and I've had some great therapy around that, and I've dealt with it. I've had incredible highs. I mean, I was elected to the school board when I was 18 and in high school, and and then have been places where you wonder if the darkness is going to win. I really do live the analogy that every day is a gift. I really believe that. But some gifts you want to return. And so
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, because we all get the gift we don't want. The ugly Christmas sweater. You're like, do you even know me? And so if you try to live a life that every day is a gift and that we have to appreciate every gift, you can't. That's a Pollyanna.
Right. Yeah.
But you can live a life that says, wow, this is awesome that I'm here, but if you have enough days that you want to return them, then you have to think about the change. And so I think your premise of this podcast, this later in life, when you finally listen to all those, pay attention to all those gifts you return and go, you know what? I want to change what people are giving me. I want to change what life is giving me.
Yeah.
And if you have the luxury, the privilege of being able to do that, to really make some change, that's pretty powerful. And yeah, that was a really long answer to the question of tell us about where you're from.
So let's back up a little bit. Let's back up a little bit and talk about how we first met, because you talk about how you travel a lot. You've always been kind of a wanderer, and you've always been someone up for new experiences. When I first met you, I want to know what your first memory of me is. But my first memory of you is you had just moved to Chicago, I believe, and were looking to move. And you had just basically uprooted your life and came to Chicago with a new job. You already felt like someone who lived there for a long time when I met you. You already seemed connected. You already seemed ready to go. And I remember just being so impressed by your energy, because for people who, the people who don't know, you rented our apartment from us that we were trying to sublet at that time, and you're looking for a place to land. And that's how we met you. And I was like, this guy has more energy than anyone I've ever met. You were just bouncing off the walls.
So I remember that night perfectly. I remember knocking on the door. I remember walking in, and I walked into the apartment and I was like, oh, I love this apartment. Oh, this is perfect. But I also loved it because you had painted that one wall in the apartment that bright orange or orange red. It was this and my
such early 2000s aesthetic, right?
Oh my God, it was awesome. But if you kind of remember it, you remember I had a chair with that color in it. That color was one of my primary colors. I loved it. And I didn't repaint. In fact, the 10 years I lived in that apartment, the whole time I lived in that apartment, I never touched that wall. It didn't get repainted until I moved out of the apartment. So we basically pretty quickly were like, yeah, I'll take the apartment. I love it. It's good. As I left, I remember it was either you or Gator, but I remember maybe going, or I turning and going, yeah, we should do dinner or something. This was great. You were one of my first Chicago friendships. You and Gator were one of the first, because I did move to Chicago because of my career, and I knew hundreds of people in Chicago professionally.
Okay, so we're going to skip ahead a little bit and talk about where you are now and how you got there. There was a long period of time that I knew you, that you were an executive working in an office, and now you're a consultant traveling the world, and you seem to have had this big mental shift. You seem like you've opened up in some way. And I know there's a lot that happened between that period of time. I know, and there's this particular instance, if you're comfortable talking about it, that I want to talk about. But I know that you moved to Michigan during the pandemic, and you made this big life change. Can you talk about what happened and where you are today?
There was a great book that I read back in my early 20s. It was called The Best Little Boy in the World. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's written
No.
by a gay man who is Catholic and who was always trying to be the best little boy. The best little boy for his parents, the best little boy for the church, the best little boy. It's, now it's a dated book, but at the time I remember reading it I think I read it in my late 20s or early 30s. And I was like, yep, that's me. And at the time I was like, cool. Like, I understand it. I accept it. So my whole life has started as, again, this gay kid in Montana who was always just trying to prove that he was worth something to the world. And so I had created a career path that was the representative of how you do it in my industry, the association world. Bigger, better, more. My entire life was focused on being a CEO, being a corporate 9-to-5 guy. And then when COVID hit and I decamped to Michigan, to my house in Michigan, which was supposed to be a weekend home, but turned into my home. My whole world collapsed during COVID in a pretty dark way. I am almost a dysfunctional extrovert. I have to work through people. So COVID for me was mentally and physically dangerous. I mean, and it was good. I mean, I dealt with it. I would get out. I exercised more than I ever did because I had to get out of the house. Of course, that was fun. Freezing cold friggin' March and April in Michigan is not a pleasant time to go for walks some mornings. And I got through 2020, and 2020 was really tough. And then at the end of 2020, I had an absolute crisis happen. I became the victim of a cyber blackmail attempt. And they came after me, and they threatened everything I'd spent by that point, 50 years building. Well, 30 years building, because the first 10 years I built Lincoln Logs. I got pretty dark. I mean, it got really dark. I was sitting in the Michigan house between Christmas and New Year's, wondering whether or not I should put plastic down. I mean, that's where I was. I was done. I was ready. I was ready for life to be over, to make the hurt go away. Obviously, that didn't happen. I'm still here. And basically what happened is I got angry. I got emotionally angry, and I have enough trigger warnings in me to deal with anger. So that's how I survive. I get angry, which then forces me to then deal with being angry. January came and I'm like, okay, I think everything I thought I wanted, I don't know if I want that. I really don't know. About end of May, I exited my company, exited my day job, and I took some time. And I just thought about the world, and I thought about what I wanted out of Michigan. It was interesting because the rabbits in my yard never quite understood why I wanted to have staff meetings with them every day. But I had this huge weight lift off of me. I learned a few things. I learned that gardening is not something that gives me any level of peace. I want plants, but I don't. Some people gardening, like, they love it, right? They're out there. Not me. I just hated it. I'm like, can I just get the damn flower boxes fixed? Can I just go over to Sawyer Garden Center, buy them, and put them on my deck?
Can I pay someone?
Pretty much. Can I outsource this? And so I had, Bob, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So the thing when you say it just seemed like, boom, in 2022, all of a sudden you're making all these decisions. They were really quite deliberate, with a lot of conversation with myself and others during 2021.
Yeah.
And it started with, what do I want to do for a living? Like, what do I want to do? What do I care about? What do I like? And it became very clear to me, I didn't want a full-time dedicated job. I'm a consultant now. I have a full-time job, but I didn't want CEO, it's never 9 to 5. But I didn't want everyone every day counting on me every day. I didn't want that. I know that I'd always loved travel. I mean, you knew that about me. I think that probably became pretty clear early on. If you saw my apartment and just my space. And I sat down and I just said, okay, how's this going to happen? What's this going to be?
I appreciate you sharing that about yourself in terms of the dark period you went through. And I wasn't sure how much you wanted to talk about that, but I don't know if I knew how much it was a driver for what you changed and how you changed your life. I guess I didn't make that connection. I think it speaks to your character and the fact that you activated versus regressing. And you said, what can I do in this situation? Where can I find control? And I think as we get older and as we kind of learn more about ourselves, it's easy, I think, to model your life after what's known and comfortable. And you went for the thing that is unknown in a lot of ways. Did you have someone whose life that you thought this could look like, or were you kind of going just based on like a vision of what you thought it could be?
So the answer there is there were a number of people. And so, the first catalyst was when I realized that when I was sitting in Michigan contemplating ending my life, I was contemplating ending my life because somebody threatened my public identity tied to my job. That I had spent all this time curating this public identity, this Greg Fine, this strong, leader, this person who people want to follow, inspirational, all of that. And somebody threatened that and came at me. And I was so scared of losing that and letting my mom down. And again, best little boy in the world, right? Letting all these people down. And, how could I recover from it? And when I got through that, and I did have somebody in my space that I reached out to during that moment. And I called her and I said, I'm in trouble. And I remember she said, what's up going on? And I said, I almost killed myself.
Yeah.
And there was dead silence. And she goes, and she was not anywhere near Michigan. She goes, do I need to come? I mean, this is December of 2020. She was like, do I need to come? And I go, no. She goes, do I need to call somebody? No, I'm okay. I promise I'm okay. She said, good. And she talked me through it. And she asked me, I told her about the blackmail. I told her what they were doing. And she laughed. I'll never forget this. She laughed. But her laugh was the laugh I needed to hear because of who she was as a human. And it was that moment of humor, that moment of human connection, and that moment of understanding it. And she goes, and Greg, more important, Greg, you do know there's hundreds of people. She didn't say 10. She said there's hundreds of people that you have helped. There's hundreds of people that you have trust. There are hundreds of people that all you have to do is ask, and your army will be activated.
Yeah.
And we will be there for you.
Yeah.
You are not alone. And what was fascinating, over the next 6 days, I got texts from people. And I found out later that this good friend of mine simply reached out to people and said, Greg's an extrovert. He's going crazy in Michigan. He needs to hear from you. That's all she sent. She didn't say, Greg's in trouble. What was me? She knew me, right? Everybody who knows me, I'm an extrovert. So I was getting memes. I got a family reading the night before Christmas. I got all these things that told me, Bob, that there's an army of people who say you matter.
Yeah.
And if you matter, then life is worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, what do I do? Then I talked to some consultants that I respected and said, how do you build a practice? Because I'm still type A, right? How do I build a practice? What does it look like? How much revenue do you think I could get? How do you get clients? I'm very technical.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, I can't be a consultant and live in Michigan. In Sawyer, Michigan, because the airport's too far. It's just too, and the market was so crazy. The market, when I put my house on the market, was so crazy. So I'm like, this is the top of the market. We're selling, baby. We're getting out of here.
Yeah.
And then I needed to decide to where to go, and I needed a good airport. I needed no snow. I wanted mountains. I wanted no snow. I wanted to get back to closer to my family, no snow. And I had some good friends, some very, very dear friends that ended up relocating to Phoenix during COVID. So they were here. I knew a couple people here. It's a place I enjoyed, checked all the boxes to support me in my change.
Yeah.
And I've always considered now Arizona is simply base camp. It's not my home. My home is wherever I happen to be and where I'm with people, but it is my base camp and it's where it anchors me.
Talk a little bit about Travels with Greg, because I know it's kind of an outlier. It's an outbranch of kind of this new philosophy you've kind of cultivated around your work and life and travel. Tell me a little bit about that and how it ties into what this like next phase of your life has been. How did it come about and what is it?
So basically it really comes down to, and you remember this before Instagram and everything else, but I was an early adopter of Facebook. And so I would always be posting my travels whenever I would travel, even for work and other things on Facebook, right? And I would get people who'd be like, oh, I really wish I could travel like you. Really wish I could travel like Greg. The name came out of people just stop posting on Facebook, telling us how fabulous your life is.
Because
And so
traveling is a skill, Greg. It is such a skill.
Mhm.
I am such a bad traveler because I overpack everything. I don't plan very well. I'm very much like, we'll show up and see what happens, and it never works out. I'm surprised you don't have a personal assistant to help you like figure out where you're going because you are everywhere all at once at the same time, it feels like. It's crazy.
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And by the way, I can help people like you. So travel like Greg, really, as I began to think about being a consultant and having that as my primary income and my primary way to do it was I did have this passion for travel. So I was looking at all the other influencers out there. A lot of, I mean, God, there's a gazillion influencers, right? I mean, it's just, and I was actually on a cruise with a major influencer at the time. And I was like, oh, very cool. It's like, I think they're an influencer. And they were. And at one night I said, hey, would you like to join me for dinner? I'm traveling by myself, but you can't bring your camera, just you and me. And
Hmm.
they kind of looked at me like, I can't bring my camera. I go, nope. So they agreed and we had dinner. And I learned the life of being a real influencer sucks. I
Mm.
mean, people. I think people think if you just throw up a couple of videos on Instagram and you suddenly or TikTok, you're suddenly a sensation. No, once you become a sensation, it has to be fed. And it was interesting to have the conversation with this individual about their journey and how they were burning out because travel and influence was no longer, there was no joy in it. It was all work.
Well,
That was
what did you learn
yeah.
from that? How did that help you?
So what that did for me is I realized right away that travel like Greg was not designed now as a monetization tool. My niche, my travel like Greg niche is really great. I'm just about to approach 1,400 followers there. I'm growing organically. I don't owe anything to anyone. I can just share my content. I don't care what my views are.
Yeah.
And so it really was designed, Travel Like Greg really was designed to just be me sharing my travel. And if you like it, you follow me. But also as an entrepreneur, because I have an entrepreneur's heart and soul,
Yeah.
I wanted to lay the foundation in case I ever did want to monetize it, in case Travel Like Greg if decided I don't want to do management consulting anymore. I've
Yeah.
built the platform to be able to monetize Travel Like Greg if that's something that I want to do.
I love it because we not only do we get to see your amazing photos and like be like, where the hell are you and are you safe, Greg? Fine. Where you are right now. Not only is it to like look at it and be jealous and see the beautiful places you are and like be inspired, but it's also like your personal mantra. It's kind of like your philosophy for where you are right now. And I want you to talk a little bit around what that feels like. Do you feel like you are in the place you're meant to be right now?
No question. And what it is that I've achieved synergy in my life. So I joke that it's not a joke, it's actually true, that I have just enough expensive travel booked that I've only put a deposit down on that forces me to keep working because I still need to work. I'm too type A and I like my
Hmm.
work. And I have enough big chunks of travel on the schedule that makes it impossible for me to work too much as a management consultant because I understand myself. If I only have one thing to throw myself into, I throw myself into it 180%. I threw myself 180% into being an association CEO. And when somebody threatened to take that away from me, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I want a life that is about a third management consult, well, a management consulting, speaking, whatever that is, travel advising, and then I just call it aimless wandering. So
Yeah.
what you don't see in the kind of curated world that I still do, because that's just who I am, is the times I just sit still. It might be on a beach in Fiji. It might be that I had a day or two in Des Moines, Iowa. I was always fighting to find balance between being the CEO, the staff, balance to be the travel, balance to take care of family. It's another thing too. I now have the ability that I go to Montana, I just get in the car, I'll drive to Montana and spend 2 weeks in Montana so that I can be present in the lives of my mom and dad,
Yeah.
mom and
Yeah.
stepdad. I'm still working. People are like, "Oh, I'm sorry to invade your safari on vacation." No, I don't have vacation. I have synergy.
The thing I love that you said is you've kind of, for another consulting term, you've created your own forcing function. You're not going to work too hard because you've packed your travel in. and you have to pay for that travel by working. So you've kind of created this cyclical thing that seems like it's working out really well for you. I want to talk about your travels. Like, what are some, like, give me like two of the most interesting people you've met.
So one of the most interesting people that I met is Mara, who I've built the leadership leap with. I met Mara on one of my first Atlas Ocean Voyages small
And
yacht.
Leadership Leap is kind of it's like a executive coaching enterprise
It's
of some
actually
sort.
it's actually an executive retreat experience. It's a whole new way to create a leadership retreat. That's what's called Leadership Leap.
I
And
see. Okay.
so is Mara is actually someone you should interview for this podcast. So she is the former travel editor for Bon Appetit.
Hmm.
She was a senior executive inside of Condé Nast. And her experience, her stories are amazing. And she became and positioned herself as a master of taste and tradition. Her food knowledge, her love of adventure and travel. And so she has things that every taste has a tradition, every tradition has a taste. And she does these, I met her, she was the culinary expert on the cruises, and we've cruised a couple times since. And I have brought her in a couple times with clients to do what's called a table journey, where you sit around the table and you use food and the metaphor of food to create connections with people that maybe they don't see coming. So I always say
Oh, I
it
love
creates
that.
connections that no trust fall can ever create. So
What,
she definitely is one of the most interesting people that I've met on
what's
I
another
would say.
one? One more.
Yeah, oh God, there's been so many. This was years ago. This was before I even moved to Chicago. And I was on a Windjammer barefoot cruise. The company doesn't even exist. We were in the Caribbean. And there was this woman on the cruise. She was 96.
Wow.
She was blind in one eye, still driving, which was terrifying, from Atlanta. And she was amazing. And the story she told, and growing up and being that old, and her husband, when he asked her to marry him, and she went to her mother and she said, so-and-so wants to marry me. Her mother says, you can't marry him. She goes, why? And she goes, because you're a terrible cook, and wives have to cook. Now, I think about 90 years, right? We're talking so she went to her wannabe fiance and she said, my mother says I can't marry you. And he said, why? Because I can't cook. He says, we'll eat out. And they ate out dinner. They had dinner out every night of their entire lives.
Wow. Brava. Do you remember her name?
Evelyn.
Evelyn.
Yeah.
We love
But
Evelyn.
they decided we were going to do lunch on this beach. So we anchor the ship, and they're taking food back and forth. And it's time to go to the beach to have lunch. And they say, you can go to the beach one of two ways. You can jump in the water and swim ashore, or we'll take you ashore in the boat. And if you swim ashore, just throw some, we'll have a towel and some dry clothes and,
Mm-hmm.
And so we're all like, we're going to jump in the water. And I look over and Evelyn is standing at the side of the boat, 96 years old, blind in one eye. And she said, okay, everybody, when I jump, remember, I'm blind. I'll never forget this. I'm blind in one eye. So somebody needs to swim in front of me so I can see your feet kicking in the water, and I'll just follow you to shore. And we're all like, Evelyn, should you? And then she jumped. And then she's like, let's go, everybody. And I've always remembered about how at night in her 80s, when her husband died, she could have retreated into life. And she didn't. She went and explored, and she jumped. And for me, I've always been, don't wait until you're 96 to jump.
I love Evelyn. I love that story. And what is something you've learned about yourself?
So I think the thing that I've learned the most about transitioning to being a consultant and this journey, and watching people follow me and reach out to me and build the connections. I've always felt that people valued me, but I think I often thought it was more transactional. That they valued me because I did something for them.
Right.
Because what's interesting, you and Gator never really saw the Greg side, except publicly, maybe on LinkedIn. The Gregory J. Fine side.
Right.
You always knew Greg.
Yeah.
You just knew Greg.
Yeah.
And my circle of people who just know Greg is actually really small. It's really small. It's always been really small. And so for me, I spent my life, Bob, trying to prove to everybody and show everybody that I was relevant. What I figured out, particularly in the last 2 years, is that I matter. And that's a different thing than being relevant, because I had to get to the point where I realized I matter to me, that I'm not doing any of this for anyone else. I'm doing it for me. And if I do it for me, and I'm strong and I'm secure in me, that I matter to
Mm-hmm.
me, then I can give lots to others. It's, if you think about the
Yeah.
travel metaphor, is you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
No, we all say we try to do that, but boy, most people are terrible about that. They're really
Yeah.
terrible. But I'm done. I'm done chasing relevance, and I'm just focusing on, do I matter? And then I open myself up to realizing who I matter to. That was the really interesting thing, as I began to realize that there's all these people who, it's not fake. They're authentic. Like, I matter to them, and because I matter to them, they matter to me. And it's a weird word, but it's to me, it's a really powerful word. So,
Do you
um,
feel in your traveling that you're meeting people who are kind of in the same journey you are, of like they've like kind of uprooted their lives and are taking like a big swing? Do you feel you're meeting people who kind of are meeting you where you are right now? That might have helped you realize this thing that
most of the people that I meet on my travels, because I'm not a 20-year-old backpacker living in hostels,
I'm not either.
and you're not, I'm past that phase. If I try to go to a hostel now, they'll be like, "Sir, get out! Why are you're a creepy old man? Get out!" Or no. Um, so I would actually say that the majority of people that I meet in my travels are actually people who are still searching. They're on
Yeah.
vacation. What's
Yeah.
interesting is I often find myself in situations where people are very curious about what I'm building, and I'll end up in conversations late in the evening, whether it's around the safari fire or the lounge on a ship or standing on the Nile or whatever, with a lot of people in their 40s, mid 40s, who just, they want to talk. They want me to tell my story, and then it starts into a conversation about finding the courage to do it. Positioning yourself. Um, and I joke that my dad, who was an amazing man, he was a really hard man to like, pretty easy guy to love,
Mm.
but he was magic. And I
Hmm.
remember him sitting down with me one time when I was very young. At that time, he didn't know I was gay. And he called me Igor. My nickname with him was Igor, because that's the middle of Gregory. And he was the only one who ever called me Igor. And so he looked at me, and we were at a restaurant having dinner. The mayor of the town had just stopped by the table to say hello to my dad. He looked at me and he said, "Igor, you're not going to have an easy life." And I looked at him and I said, "Okay." I was a fat little kid then, but I didn't know I didn't know I was gay even. And I go, "Why?" He goes, "Because you're magic, and magic people don't have easy lives. But if you find the other magic people, that's the key to success. That's the key to happiness."
How old were you?
I was probably 7 or 8.
What a philosophical thing to say to an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Well, my dad also really
Did
liked,
you
my dad
understand what
also,
that meant when he said that?
not really, but it did, but it
Yeah.
was, and he also drank a lot, so he was probably drunk. But anyway,
Oh
uh,
no.
but here's what's really fascinating. What I have found in the last few years is that, so everyone called my dad Father Fine, because everyone would go to him for advice. My dad was really good about giving advice, terrible about following it. The other thing that I love about travel, Bob, and I love that you say this, is that travel really forces me to be patient, and I am not a patient person.
What does
And
that
I
what
am
does that
not.
mean for you? What does
So,
patience mean for you?
well, patience for me, in some respects, is just, okay, people, it's a conveyor. Stand to the right, walk to the left, stand to
Yeah.
the right, walk to the, like, don't be a
Yeah.
jerk, watch your backpack. But it's also, being self-reliant. You get into the middle of a downtown city, no one speaks English, there's no internet connection, and you just have to make do.
What does this new chapter mean to you? Like if you were to give a title to this chapter in your life, what would it be and why?
The real bridge.
And explain that.
And throughout my life, I thought I was bridging to the next phase, to the next place. And they all turned out to be false bridges, that they were a bridge that actually didn't take me to a new place. It just took me to a slightly different place where I already was.
Hmm.
And that now I'm kind of letting the future unfold in a way that I have some degree about where I'll probably end up, but how, I don't know. And when I say kind of where, situationally, but not specifically.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense because If we were to say, oh, this is the final bridge, I'd be like, Greg, do we need to do a health check on you? What does that mean? Because we're all like, we can't presume to know what the rest of things are going to look like. But what this bridge, it sounds like, means to you is you have gone someplace that you realize that this is a change. It was a big change for you. Some of it out of necessity, some of it out of desire. And where you've landed is like exactly where you need to be. I like that you said you kept going to different bridges and you always ended up in the same versions of where you were before.
Yep.
And that might be like a comfort thing. I think a lot of people do that. They go for a change and they end up reverting back to where their comfort level was.
And I think the bridge analogy for me too is that once this bridge is crossed, this is not a bridge I go back over. Like I'm not gonna. It doesn't mean I can't, but for me, I'm not gonna go back. But I'm also not going back, throwing up a big wall I can't see. I'm gonna look back and go, yeah, I still learned there. I'm gonna carry those lessons forward with me.
So if someone were to come to you, let's say someone slips in your DMs and says, "Hey, I'm really loving what you're doing. I want to do something similar like that, but it's too late in life for me." What's the guidance you give to them?
Jump.
Jump. Love it. Thank you, Greg and Evelyn, for the great words of advice. Thank you for listening to Later in Life. I'm your host, Bob Bullen. The show was edited and produced by me. Cover art by Rachel Joyce. Theme music by Rocky Patera. If you have a story that you'd like to share that you think fits the vibe of this show, please reach out to me at thebroadwaybob@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And remember, it's never too late